Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto is neglected by family Kekkei Genkai Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Have you ever wondered about your purpose in life? Or perhaps wondered why you were even born to begin with? Has your life ever been so bad to the point that you once thought, maybe I shouldn't even exist? For one Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, he's wondered about questions like this many times before. Why? You may ask. Well, for that we need to go back a ways, approximately 15 years to the time of his birth when the Kyuubi was released from its seal and was unleashed upon the village of Konohagakure. Back then, Kushina had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Their names were Naruto, naturally, and Naruko. Naruto was the older of the two by 2 minutes and 34 seconds, thus making him the heir to the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans. However, this is not important, at least, not yet. What is important is the fact that a rather ambitious, slightly deranged man attacked this night and ripped the Kyuubi from Kushina's seal while she was weakened. Now, normally, a Jinchuriki would die upon having their Biju ripped from them in such a way, but the Uzumaki were known for their great longevity and their stubbornness. As a result of these two things, Kushina survived and was able to help her husband fight back the fox and therefore restrain it long enough for them to begin the sealing process. However, the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, appeared and stopped them, offering to do the sealing in their stead. Reluctantly, the husband and wife pair let him, his argument winning them over in the end. After all, he was correct in the fact that they should be there for their newborn children. So, the great god of shinobi, as he was called, sealed the yang half of Kyuubi into dear Naruko and sealed the yin half and Kyuubi's soul into our blonde protagonist, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Now, one would think it would be smart to keep such a thing silent and close to the chest so as to give them a chance at a normal childhood, wouldn't you? Well, the very next day, Minato Namikaze, as the brilliant Yondaime Hokage, announced to the village that his dear children housed the Kyuubi and explained that Naruto now housed the soul of the Kyuubi, thus painting a huge target on his back, much to Kushina's anger. She had argued against this decision vehemently, but her idiotic, idealistic husband had believed that his villagers would see their children as the heroes they were. She knew otherwise, however, and she was prepared for what was to come. Which is why Minato had to go without for a good few years, much to his consternation. It didn't help that she made him sleep on the couch for that entire time either, which really wasn't helping his mood any. Fast forward to Naruto and Naruko's second year at the academy. By this point in time, Naruto had grown quite used to the beatings he would receive from the villagers. He was also quite used to his father pardoning them, believing them to be innocent of such acts of violence, despite the claims of ninjas such as Anko Mitarashi, Ibiki Morino, Sum Inuzuka, Inoichi Yamanaka, and others who had caught the perpetrators red-handed. In fact, Minato even threatened to punish his ninja if they were to continue with their lies, and they were each forced to leave things be or else face judgment at the hands of their Hokage. Still, the ninjas that saw Naruto for what he was did everything they could for young Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. They protected him when they could. They fed him when they found out he wasn't being fed at home. They took the time to train him in whatever they could since he wasn't getting any training at home. Overall, they did what they could for him. Ah yes, his home life. The neglect. His mother and sister were always kind to him, but there were times they were surprisingly forgetful of him. Naruto could tell that something was going on with them, something that was making them forget about him, but he wasn't skilled enough yet to figure out what exactly that was. Minato, on the other hand, oh, he was a rotten scumbag of a father. Minato feigned he cared about his son in front of others, but in truth, he treated Naruto like he was trash. He would constantly degrade Naruto and put him down for the simplest of reasons. The bastard refused to train Naruto and refused to allow Kushina to train him either, telling her that Naruto wasn't worth their time. And when Naruto asked if Naruto could train with her, Minato said that he wouldn't allow Naruto to taint her by being allowed to train beside her. It was always one thing or another with him. But the day we're meant to focus on now is the day of their 10th birthday. They had just returned home from the academy and all their friends. Well, Naruto's friends were there. Naruto didn't have any friends his own age, unfortunately. He simply hadn't been able to make any. However, he did see some of the people that had been nice to him, and he did consider some of them friends, so maybe he did have friends here after all. There was also that one Anbu here that always took time out of his schedule to spend time with him. He had a weasel mask and had nice black hair going down his back. Naruto really admired him. He thought he was pretty cool. Minato had just called for everyone's attention and smiled around at everyone. Once he had everybody's attention, he decided to make his announcement. Everyone, I'm proud to announce that I'm making Naruko-chan the heiress of the joint Uzumaki Namikaze clan. So congratulations dear, he declared, a proud smile on his face as he looked to his daughter. What happened next, however, threw everyone off guard. Kushina lashed out with a hard punch that nailed Minato right in the eye, sending him reeling backwards. Immediately afterwards, she kicked him hard in the crotch, causing his eyes to roll back into his head and for foam to start bubbling up in his mouth. Before she could throttle him any further, Jiraiya appeared behind her and restrained her. What the Kushina? I thought you'd be happy. Why the hell are you trying to kill your husband over this? He exclaimed angrily. Kushina reared her head forward before smashing it backwards into Jiraiya's face, breaking the cartilage in his nose and causing him to reel backwards, screaming in pain as he clutched at his face. Before she could do it, her daughter, Naruko, rushed forward and slammed her fist into Jiraiya's testicles as hard as she could. Because Naruto ni is the heir. That's why. Daddy shouldn't have done that. It's wrong, she declared angrily. The busty red-headed wife of the Yondaime nodded proudly of her daughter and stomped her foot on the ground. Damn right. Looking around for her son, she didn't see him anywhere. Instead, she saw a great group of people missing as well as her son. It would seem that Naruto and his group of friends had vacated the building as soon as the announcement was made. Oh Naruto-kun, I am so sorry. Present day. After that day, Naruto's family had been a broken mess. Kushina and Naruko still had trouble remembering Naruto even existed sometimes, though they couldn't quite understand why. Naruto had his suspicions, and he was pretty certain it was because Minato had done something to them. If his guess was right, it was by means of a seal he and his sensei, Jiraiya, had likely come up with. His only problem was figuring out where the seal was and how to undo it. Naruto had decided that, after graduation, he would move out of this house and find a nice apartment to live in. Or, more than likely, he'd take that Anko lady up on her offer and move in with her. She was a nice enough person and he'd be happy enough to live with her for a while. Right now, the young blonde was watching his parents as they trained his red-headed twin sister in the backyard from within his room. He didn't much care anymore what they did. But, he did take note of what they trained her in and made use of whatever he could for his own training if he thought it would be useful for him. Hey, a shinobi uses anything they can to their advantage. What he noticed most these days, however, was that Minato and Kushina barely talked to each other. His mother had yet to forgive Minato for all the wrongs he had done, and Minato had never put forth the effort to so much as apologize for any of it. After all, he believed he was in the right. He was of the belief that he could do no wrong, and therefore should not have to apologize. Ever. Meanwhile, his sister wanted to show love and support for both of her parents, but something about Minato just rubbed her the wrong way. Still, she would accept his training, because she wanted to get stronger. She wanted to be strong enough to ensure that no harm ever came to her precious ones or to the village she so dearly loved. Naruto, however, he cared absolutely nothing for the village. It was just a place he lived in and he would probably just watch and laugh as it burned. However, he had people that he loved here in the village and he'd be damned before he watched any of them be hurt. So therein lay the conflict. To protect his precious people, he'd have to protect the village and its people as well, despite everything they had done to him. But, if he were to let the enemy simply raze the village and destroy its people, he'd run the risk of his precious people coming to harm in the process. Quite the quandary, wouldn't you agree? As soon as his family had finished training, Naruto put away his notes and went about getting ready for the day. They had to get to the academy after all. It was their last year and he had no intentions of failing the final exam coming up in a couple of weeks. Sure, Mizuki had been tampering with his tests at first, but after bringing this news forward to his mother, she quickly took care of it, much to Minato's protests. Needless to say, Mizuki would never be the same ever again. Mostly because he was now missing a few limbs due to an irate Kushina. Thankfully, it was now just Iruka-sensei teaching the class and Naruto was being given a fair shake at things. He was near the top of the class and was doing pretty darn well, all things considered. The Uchiha twins, Sasuke and Satsuki, and his own sister Naruko, were some of the only ones that were placed higher than him in the class. Joining his family downstairs, he walked over to the kitchen table and sat down, waiting for his mother to place some food before him. When she completely passed over him, he sighed and shook his head, realizing she had forgotten him once again. Looking to his sister, he could see her looking at him sadly. She went to offer him some of her food, but Naruto waved her off and rose from his chair, making his way out of the house. He would simply stop at a restaurant and eat breakfast there. Academy 1.5 hours later. Walking into the classroom, Naruto found himself lost in thought as he continued to think about his mother and sister. Thankfully, class hadn't yet started, though the majority of the students had arrived and Iruka-sensei was getting his things together in preparation to start the class. As Naruto began absent-mindedly walking up the steps towards his usual seat, he kept thinking about where the seal could be on his mother and sister and what he'd have to do to get rid of it. One of the boys in the class, one of those that loved to bully Naruto every chance he got, noticed how distracted Naruto seemed to be and leaned over to his friend, whispering to him, "Hey, watch this. This'll be hilarious." Sticking his foot out in Naruto's path, everyone in the class watched as Naruto tripped over the boy's outstretched leg and went falling forwards at an angle towards one Satsuki Uchiha, much to everyone's horror. Reaching out to brace himself, Naruto couldn't quite catch himself in time and, much to everyone's shock, most especially his and Satsuki's, his right hand landed on her left and his lips connected to hers. What happened next could only be described as a miracle. A pillar of light erupted around the two of them, blinding everyone in the room and forcing them to cover their eyes for fear of going blind. When it finally died down, Naruto and Satsuki had separated, and Satsuki was standing there, sporting a new, more revealing outfit and wielding a rather deadly-looking katana, its sheath strapped to her back. The top half of her outfit looked strangely like a kimono top, though it hung loosely and allowed a lot of cleavage to be shown. Considering she had large C-cup, and they were still growing, this bothered her a great deal. Her sleeves were long and loose as well, spilling lowly off her arms and leaving plenty of room for her to conceal weapons within them. However, the bottom half of her outfit is what really bothered her. There were 4 long strips of cloth that went from her waist down to just above her ankles. Between these strips of cloth you could see straight through to her legs. It was lucky that she wore shorts, or else you could see what kind of panties she was wearing. Her entire outfit was lavender in color and had a lovely yellow and pink flower print across the entire thing. Naruto, on the other hand, had undergone a slight change as well. He now looked the part of a traditional samurai. On the upper half of his body he wore a white tunic that exposed the upper part of his chest and left his arms bare. For pants, he wore baggy red and black kimono-style pants that fell loosely around his legs. In his right hand, he, too, had a katana, though this one had a deadly red gleam emanating from it. Slipping it away into its sheath, which was strapped at his hip, Naruto looked at Satsuki and blushed badly before looking away. I'm so sorry Satsuki-chan. Are you okay? I didn't mean to trip like that, he said, completely ignoring the fact that the two of them had undergone such a drastic change. Satsuki was looking herself over before looking at Naruto upon hearing the sound of his voice. For a moment she blushed at how he now looked before she quickly shook her head and pointed at him accusingly. You, what the hell did you just do to us? I mean, look at us. She shouted out. That was my first kiss. And now, grabbing Naruto by the front of his tunic, she pulled him in close so his face was nearly touching hers and she growled at him. Now we have to get married, you stupid jerk. Everyone's eyes went wide at this proclamation and Satsuki's fans screamed out, what? While Naruto was sweating nervously and quickly shook his head. What the heck do you mean get married? I'm not ready for that. And we barely even know each other. Isn't this rushing things a little? Satsuki blushed worse and released Naruto before she looked down and shuffled her feet. Mom says that you're only supposed to kiss someone if you're dating them or planning to marry them. But, father says that if you let someone touch you there, you have to marry that person. Mom said that you should only do that with someone you're planning to marry. So, there you have it. We have to get married. Thanks a lot, Naruto. Sasuke was seething at this point. His sister was going to be forced to marry this idiot. Not on his watch. So, jumping out of his seat, he went to attack Naruto. However, before he could make it even 2 steps, Satsuki pressed her new blade to his throat and glared at him. What do you think you're trying to do to my new fiancé brother? I may not like it, but I won't allow you to kill him just because you don't like him. Sasuke glared fiercely at his sister before switching his glare to the Dobi, as he considered him to be. Why are you defending him? First he gropes you and now you're being forced to marry him due to some stupid rule father made, and you still protect this jerk. What's wrong with you? Before Satsuki could reply, Naruto walked up and glared at him. Hey, that jerk, as you call him, is my brother. And he didn't do it on purpose. That stupid jerk right there tripped him. Or didn't you see that? Oh, high and mighty, Uchiha? She mocked. Besides, I'm sure if you just talk to your parents and explain what happened, everything will be okay. But, I'm more concerned about what happened to the both of them. Uruka-sensei, do you have any idea what's going on? Why the two of them suddenly changed like that? Naruto and Satsuki both blinked in realization at this point before looking at each other and nodding as one before they turned to their teacher. That's right. What is going on, Uruka-sensei? They asked as one. Uruka frowned at this and rubbed at his chin in thought. Putting aside the marriage issue, he thought back to all known Kekkei Genkai. This was obviously the sign of a Kekkei Genkai being activated, but which one could it be? It was then that it struck him. A Kekkei Genkai that originated in Iron Country of all places, the home of the samurai. It was highly unusual, but especially gifted samurai sometimes inherited this Kekkei Genkai and with it were able to gift others with the abilities of the samurai through the power of. Smiling at his students, Uruka decided to clear the air. Naruto, you've awakened a Kekkei Genkai. This Kekkei Genkai is one that originated in Iron Country, the home of the samurai. Your Kekkei Genkai is unique in the fact that it's something that was commonly only seen in the samurai of Iron Country, which is a rarity in the world we live in, as samurai don't use chakra in the same way we ninjas do. Your Kekkei Genkai is known as Bushi no Kisu or Samurai's Kiss. With this gift, anyone of the opposite gender that you kiss will be gifted with the power and abilities of a samurai, just like you, yourself have now become. So congratulations Naruto and Satsuki, you are the first samurai ninjas in the world. You should feel proud of yourselves. Uruka explained with a smile. Naruto and Satsuki looked at each other and couldn't help but break out into huge grins at this before high-fiving each other. Hell yeah, this is awesome Naruto. Satsuki shouted out, happy that she could be this awesome samurai ninja mixed breed thingy thanks to Naruto. But then she remembered how it happened and she blushed again, quickly returning to her seat and looking away. Don't touch me, she muttered. Naruto blinked, but complied regardless and moved past his sister and went to his usual seat beside Shino Aburame and a civilian-born girl. As he sat down, he looked towards his sister to see her reaction to everything that had just been revealed and saw her looking his way. When he saw her offer him a comforting smile, he smiled back and gave her a wave before he returned his attention to Satsuki. Satsuki. She was an interesting one. Half of the time she seemed grumpy to him, but the other half she seemed like an angel. She had a good group of friends, one of which was Naruto. Naruto knew that Satsuki had a bit of a temper on her, but she was a good girl regardless and he liked her well enough. Yeah, her brother was a total, but that was just how he was. He took after his father Waay too much. Fugaku was like Minato, a right bastard that didn't really give two shits about his family and treated them like crap. None of them were ever good enough, he was always right, you know the whole deal already. As Naruto stared at her, thinking about their situation and how she was of the belief that they were to be wed, Satsuki found her eyes drifting towards Naruto as well. When she saw he was looking at her, the both of them quickly turned away from one another and another blush rose to her face. If she could have seen Naruto right now, she would have seen him blushing as well. Satsuki was taking this time to think about everything she knew about Naruto, which, admittedly, wasn't all that much. She knew that he was a really nice guy and a great listener. She had only talked with him a few times in the past, but she definitely knew that much about him. Satsuki also knew, from Naruto, that Naruto's life at home was utter shit. She wasn't sure if Naruto had any training outside of the academies, so she wasn't sure how strong he really was. She certainly hoped that her husband-to-be wasn't some weakling. How could she marry someone that was weaker than her after all? Sighing to herself, she thought about how well he did in the academy and knew that he was at least smart and skilled with shuriken and kunai, so he had that much going for him at least. When she got a good look at him earlier in his samurai garb, she could see that he was certainly handsome. Thinking about it got her blushing again and even got her to giggle a little, much to her brother's horror. After a moment, Iruka finally shouted out, okay, enough of this. Naruto, Satsuki, pay attention or I'll have you two serving detention after class. Upon seeing he now had their attention, he smiled kindly at them and nodded his head once in satisfaction. Good. Now let's begin. Later that night, Uchiha compound, clan head's house. After the academy was over, Satsuki had pulled Naruto aside and invited him to come over to her home later that night. He was also told to bring his family if he wanted. Naruto, already having an idea of what this was about, and having a feeling of utter dread in the pit of his stomach, decided to invite both his mother and his sister, Naruko, to join him at the Uchiha clan head's house. There was absolutely no way in hell he was bringing his father along. So, here they were, sitting, Naruto, Kushina, and Naruko, sitting at the table with Fugaku, Makoto, Itachi, Sasuke, and Satsuki. Everyone was dressed in their nicest outfits befitting such an event, but Fugaku was glaring at Naruto the entire time, as if he was filth that had no place being in his home. Finally, after a while, tired of all the glaring, Naruto decided to get to the matter at hand and spoke up after swallowing a small helping of rice. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe I was invited over because of what transpired earlier today. Am I correct in thinking this? He queried, hoping to get this topic moving along. Before Fugaku could say anything rude or disrespectful, Makoto piped up. Why yes, you are Naruto-kun, she said, a kind, happy smile on her face. Don't worry, I'm not upset with you. What happened was an accident and we all understand that. Don't we, dear? She stressed before leveling Fugaku with her deadliest glare. Fugaku, ignoring his wife's glare, glared harder at Naruto and pointed towards the door. You are filth, and my daughter had no right to bring the likes of you into my home. Even worse, she let you lay your hands upon her. She's proven herself to be nothing more than a filthy whore. She should just leave with you. He shouted out furiously. Kushina's hair began to flail about in 9 separate tails as she slowly rose to her feet. She was furious about what this man, no, this monster had just said about not just her precious Naruto-kun, but about his own daughter. Makoto was no better. She had withdrawn a kunai from within her sleeve and was prepared to stab it into her husband's jugular vein because of what she had just heard spew forth from his mouth. Sasuke, however, he snorted and nodded in agreement. I agree, father. It was foolish. He said aloud, his arms folded across his chest and his eyes closed. He had an arrogant smirk on his face too. Itachi could only sigh at this and slammed his fist into the back of his brother's head, causing his face to go plummeting into his plate of food. That was for being an idiot, dear brother. He said, dear, coming out sarcastically. You shouldn't talk about your sister that way. Besides, father is in the wrong here. It's just a shame you take after him so much. Makoto looked at her son in a mixture of shock and horror at the fact that he dared to agree with her monster of a husband. It was at this point that she saw the tears trickling down her beloved daughter's face. Quickly rushing around the table to get to her daughter, she pulled her into a hug and began to pepper her face with kisses. Oh honey, don't listen to them. Itachi and I aren't angry with you or upset by what happened. It was an accident, honey. Accidents happen. You only have to marry him if that's what you want. And you aren't just some failure. You're my wonderful baby girl. Starting today, you, me, and Itachi are going to live on our own away from your rotten father and brother. They can do what they want. Makoto declared, furious at Fugaku and Sasuke. Itachi nodded his head in agreement and rose from where he was seated. When it looked as if Fugaku would protest, he nodded towards Kushina and she lunged at Fugaku, proceeding to beat him to within an inch of his life. Oh, she wouldn't kill him, but she'd be damn sure to rip off what makes him a man and make sure he forever regretted this day. Meanwhile, Naruto walked over to Sasuke and proceeded to kick him in the face, knocking him onto his back. Smirking down at him, she proceeded to repeatedly stomp on his crotch as fast and as hard as she could. This is for making Satsuki cry, she shouted out, clearly enjoying herself as she made Sasuke cry out in pure agony. It was unknown if he'd ever be able to use his man parts ever again after this blow to his anatomy. Once everyone was finished, Kushina decided that they should move their conversation to somewhere more pleasant. So they each agreed upon a quaint little ramen shack known as Ramen Ichiraku. Once they had arrived, they each ordered a small dish, having already eaten a small amount before their appetites were ruined earlier by Fugaku and Sasuke. Once they were all seated and their bowls of ramen had been placed in front of them, Naruto turned to Satsuki and spoke to her. Satsuki-chan, are you okay? I'm sorry about what happened there. It's my fault. I'm not well liked by most of the village. I'm sure you know why, he said sadly. Before Satsuki could say anything, Kushina spoke up in anger. No, it's not your fault, Naruto-kun. It's your father's fault. If he hadn't told the entire village about you housing the soul of the Kyuubi, people wouldn't be treating you like you're the damn fox itself. I tried to stop him, honey, but your father. Makoto frowned at this and looked closely at her friend. She could see something just under her hair. Reaching over, she brushed aside a few locks of her hair so she could get a closer look at the back of her neck, close to the middle of her back actually. When Kushina was about to turn around to see what she was doing, Makoto hissed at her. Don't move, Kushi-chan. It looks like you've got a seal on your back here, just below the nape of your neck. Your hair covers it pretty well, but when you moved I saw it. Naruto, let me have a look at you. Naruto nodded in compliance and turned her back to Makoto, allowing her to look at her back as well. Soon enough, She found what she was looking for and shook her head. Yep, these are definitely seals, but I'm not sure what they do. Do you have any idea who placed them on you two or what their purpose is? Naruto frowned and spoke up at this point. I know who did it. I also know exactly what they do. At least what their main function is, he said irritably before he began to dig into his ramen. What? He was hungry. When he saw their eyes on him, he motioned for them to begin eating before their food grew cold. As they began to eat themselves, he took a moment's break to begin explaining. I'm not sure when they did it, but Jiraiya and Minato were the ones to come up with the seal. I'm pretty sure one of them was the one to place it on the two of you. Naruto explained, causing everyone there to narrow their eyes. They were already pretty sure of what the seals did now, but they wanted to be sure before they jumped to any of the wrong conclusions. As for what the seals do, the main function seems to be making my mom and sister forget about me as often as possible. The problem is, the Uzumaki clan is a family-oriented clan and I don't think either of them took into account just how stubborn Uzumakis can be. The seal they came up with wasn't powerful enough to completely stamp out their desire to include me in the family. So it only worked about half of the time compared to full time. So, while I was neglected by my family, my mom and sister still did their best to try and include me. So for that, I do thank you too and I do not hold what you did against you. We Uzumakis must stick together after all. Family above all. Isn't that right, Mom, Naruto? He asked with a grin. Kushina and Naruto had tears in their eyes as they heard their precious Naruto-kun say that. Getting off their seats, they walked over to Naruto and hugged him tight. It was a hug that he readily returned before he nodded to them both. I've been studying up on Fuinjutsu, but I don't think I'm anywhere near skilled enough yet to remove those seals. But you too, I think that you can easily break the seals on each other. So why don't you do it tonight when we get home? And if I were you, Mom, I'd think about divorcing Minato for everything he's done. I don't know why you haven't yet. Kushina blinked at this and brought a hand up to her forehead, rubbing it a bit as she thought about it. Before she could stress herself out over it, she felt Makoto turning her around and could see the look her friend was giving her. Kushina, that may be another part of the seal. They may have included a loyalty seal in the seal so that you'd stay loyal to Minato and never think about leaving him. Once you break the seal on you and your daughter, things might become clearer for the two of you. Makoto explained helpfully. Kushina nodded at this and looked to her daughter, who was looking at her with a hopeful smile on her face. Nodding once at her, Kushina patted her on the head and they both retook their seats. We're getting these seals off of us tonight, Naruto-chan. And then, I think it's time for us to become the Uzumaki clan again. Let your father have the Namikaze name to himself, she said with a grin on her face. Naruto nodded at this and cheered before she dived back into her ramen with gusto. Naruto couldn't help but smile in relief and was about to say something before Makoto spoke up. Well now that we've got all that cleared up, why don't we talk about what happened between my little Satsuki-chan and your little Naruto-kun, It was an accident, but she seems so insistent on marrying him. Why is that, my sweet little Satsuki-chan? She queried teasingly as she looked inquisitively at her dear daughter. Satsuki began to blush furiously and looked away. It's not like I want to marry the baka. It's just, he's definitely not cute or anything. And it's not like I think he'd make a good husband or anything. I don't even know how strong he is. And besides, it's not like I like him or anything like that. You said, only people intending to get married should touch each other like that, and I thought, well, we'd have to get married. And the kiss, it's not like I hated it. But don't get me wrong. It's not like I liked it or anything. Gah. Makoto and Kushina began to laugh uproariously as Satsuki struggled to explain herself. She sounded so damn adorable to them and she was speaking in a way that they found absolutely hilarious. Itachi, however, simply smirked and ate his food in silence. Oh dear sister, you are just too easy to tease. He thought to himself, clearly amused by the whole situation. Naruto, on the other hand, was just utterly confused. So, does Satsuki like me? Or does she not like me? I'm really confused now. She's talking in riddles. He thought in distress. Clutching at his head as he tried to make sense of Satsuki's speak, he barely felt it when Naruto touched his arm and spoke his name. Huh, what was that, Naruko-chan? Naruko frowned at this and put her hand to his forehead. Are you feeling alright, Naruto-kun? You aren't looking so well. Is something wrong? She asked worriedly, causing the others in the stand, even Tuki and Ayame, to look his way. Naruto frowned at this and shook his head. I'm just feeling a little under the weather, I guess. I'm also really confused right now. I can't make any sense of what's going on right now. So, are Satsuki-chan and I getting married or not? Because I think she's beautiful. I think Satsuki is one of the smartest, most beautiful and talented girls I know. She's also kind and thoughtful, and, well, if I had to marry anyone, I can't really think of anyone better. But, if this is happening, I'd really like for us to get to know each other better first, as it wouldn't be fair for either of us to just be married off to one another without knowing anything about one another, he explained passionately. Satsuki, by this point, was so red over her entire body that it was amazing she hadn't passed out yet. Kushina and Makoto were practically swooning. They thought what he said was that damn sweet. Naruko, Odd and Itachi. Itachi was just smiling at his younger brother figure and nodded his way to show his appreciation for what Naruto had said. After a moment to gather herself, Satsuki was the one to speak up first. How can you say things like that so easily, you BB baka? You're going to make me really like you. Not to say I don't like you enough already. Wait, I'm not saying I like you. I'm just saying, wait, what am I saying? Damn it, baka. You've got me all flustered now. She shouted out, unable to fully activate her Tsunere protocols to proper effectiveness. Naruko giggled at this and looked to her brother. Well, would you look at that? I think you've got her all flustered, Naruto. Good job, she declared with a thumbs up in his direction. This earned her a kick to the leg from Satsuki, whom she was sitting next to, with her mother, Kushina, sitting on her other side. Wincing, she turned to see Satsuki was pouting at her cutely, and Naruko couldn't help but giggle a bit. Sorry, Satsuki-chan, but you have to admit you're cute when you get like that. Itachi finished the last of his meal and found himself chuckling now. Calm yourself, Satsuki-chan. He spoke after he got himself under control. Naruto-kun, what you said was very kind and very thoughtful as well. You are quite right. The two of you should focus on getting to know one another before you so much as think about getting married. Satsuki-chan, don't rush into this and spend some time in Naruto's company. Get to know him as a person and not just as your first crush. Sure, you may like him now, but what if you don't feel the same in the near or distant future? See how you feel after you spend time in each other's company and get used to one another's presence in your lives. Only by doing that can you truly determine the extent of your feelings for one another. Itachi explained calmly. Makoto smiled at her son and nodded in agreement with him. Itachi-kun's right. You two should listen to him. As much as Kushi-chan and I would love to see some beautiful black-eyed blondes and blue-eyed black-haired younglings in the future, we aren't going to push you two into a relationship if it turns out the two of you don't want it, she said, smiling sweetly at the two 15-year-olds. Thanking Makoto for her understanding, the pair looked at one another and blushed a bit before they went back to their meals and eating in silence. A short while later, after everyone had finished, Kushina decided to pose a question that was on the Uzumaki family's minds. So, Makoto-chan, where are you three going to live now? Makoto sighed and shook her head. We'll just move into a house of our own in the Uchiha compound. Fugaku's not going to exile us from the Uchiha clan, he's too stupid and too prideful in the Sharingan to let us go that easily. It's not like he'd be willing to let another clan or even some civilian family lay claim to those of us with the Sharingan. Ah, just thinking about his bullshit is giving me a headache, she said with a sigh. Itachi frowned and placed a hand on his mother's shoulder before he offered Kushina a smile. We'll be fine. Right now I'm more concerned about the two of you, Kushina, Naruto. You still need to get home and remove those seals. Then in the morning, you and my mom both need to file for divorce from your husbands. That could be a harrowing ordeal, but it's a necessary step to ensure happiness and freedom for all of us here. So I bid everyone here a good night and good luck in your endeavors. Mom, sister, let us go, he said, ushering his female family members out of the ramen shack. Realizing he was right, Kushina, Naruto, and Naruto each looked at one another before nodding in determination. After paying for their meal, the trio quickly made their way home and retreated to Naruto's room. Thankfully, Minato wasn't home yet, most likely having a late night at the office, or at least that's what Naruto and Kushina thought. Naruto, on the other hand, thought that he might have found a lover because his relationship with Kushina wasn't going so well. Regardless, that wasn't important right now. Kushina and Naruto both looked at Naruto with blushes on their faces. Naruto-kun, we're going to need to take off our shirts. You might want to wait in your room or turn around or something. Naruto said. Naruto blushed at the idea of seeing his female family members in such a state of undress and nodded before quickly bolting from the room, slamming the door behind him. They both giggled a bit before they removed their shirts and bras, leaving their tops bared to one another. Kushina decided she would go about removing Naruto's seal first and proceeded to examine the seal that had been placed upon her daughter. What she saw disgusted her. It was definitely something Jiraiya would design, the disgusting bastard. But she had never suspected that sweet little child she had once known in Minato would have helped create something so vile. What Naruto had explained about this seal was, indeed, true. Makoto's suspicions had proven true as well. There was a loyalty seal mixed in with the seal that was forcing them to stay loyal to Minato. Still, the seal was so much more than that. Based on what Kushina could see, it looked as if there was a restriction seal mixed in that would allow the creator of the seal to instantly disable them should the loyalty seal fail and they ever turn against him. The final part of the seal is what really pissed her off though. As she looked at the seal, Kushina growled and had Naruto turn to face her. Naruko-chan, this seal's going to be a bit harder to remove than I thought. She admitted. I've figured out what this seal does, and it's not pretty. With a sigh, she pulled her daughter in close and began to run her fingers through her long red hair. Naruto-kun was right, honey. These seals are meant to make us forget about him. But he and Jiraiya didn't make the seals powerful enough to make us forget about him entirely. They'd work on anyone else just fine, but we Uzumaki women are far too stubborn and family-oriented for something like this to stop us from caring for our precious Naruto-kun. Right, sweetheart, she said, smiling down at her precious Naruko-chan. Naruko nodded in agreement, but before she could say anything, Kushina carried on. Miko-chan was correct as well. There's a loyalty seal mixed in that is meant to keep us loyal to Minato. There's also something included in the seal that will allow him to restrain the both of us should his loyalty seal fail for any reason and we move against him. So say we attempt to attack him, he would be able to activate our seals and we'd collapse to the ground in complete agony because of our seals, she explained with a snarl escaping her. Here, she sighed. The final part is the most troublesome. Jiraiya and Minato made it so that these seals are powered by our own chakra networks. And because they've been on us for so long, they're a big part of us by now. Removing them is going to take a lot of chakra and it's going to hurt too. It's going to hurt real bad, sweetheart. Are you sure you can handle the pain that removing this seal is going to cause? It's going to feel like I'm ripping out your veins through your skin or something. Kushina questioned, dearly hoping her dear Naruto would be able to handle this. Naruko took a moment to think about this before she looked up into her mother's eyes and nodded once. Mom, I know this is going to be hard on me. On the both of us even. But I don't want this seal on me any longer. I want it off. So please, do what you need to do and remove the damn thing so I never have to forget my brother again. She yelled out, clearly frustrated. Kushina nodded and had her daughter turn around. Afterwards, she brought out her Fuinjutsu kit and began to draw on her daughter's back an intricate series of patterns and sealwork. Once she was finished drawing on her daughter, she proceeded to draw the same series of patterns on a sheet of paper for her daughter to copy off of when it came time to do the same on her. All right, sweetheart, here I go. Kushina said in as soothing a tone as she could. Taking a deep breath, she held up a single hand seal and said, "Curse seal removal, release." Within an instant, Naruko was on the ground, thrashing and screaming out in absolute agony as the seals her mother painted on her went about removing the seal. She had heard her mother say curse seal removal before the pain, so did that mean this was a curse seal? If so, then that just made her hate her father all the more. As her daughter writhed in pain, Kushina could only wince in sympathy for her. Her screams were so loud that she didn't hear Naruto knocking on the door and shouting out Naruko's name, asking if she was alright. At least, she wasn't aware of him until he opened the door. Looking towards him, Kushina didn't quite register the fact that both she and Naruko were from the waist up and therefore her son could get quite the generous view of their bountiful bosoms. However, Naruto didn't quite care about that at the moment, which she was thankful for when she did realize that a moment later. Instead, Naruto kneeled down by Naruko's side and quickly began brushing his fingers through her long, beautiful red hair. Naruko-chan, are you going to be alright? Naruko smiled lovingly at her brother and reached up a shaky hand to stroke his whiskered cheek. I'll be alright, Naruto-kun. It just, really hurts. Now, could you please leave? We're both TT topless and I think we've given you enough of AFF free show by now. Naruto blinked at this and glanced down to see what she meant. As soon as he saw her bare, the poor blonde fool quickly released her and rushed right back out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him once again. Kushina laughed at this while Naruko huffed and pouted cutely. Naruko, on the other hand, pouted cutely and shook her head. Jeesh. According to our clan laws, having seen me, I'd have to end up marrying him if he wasn't my brother. Naruko joked. He's really trying to go for a record. First Satsuki and now me. What's my foolish little brother thinking, huh? Kushina smirked at her daughter. Oh, are you saying you're interested in your brother Naruko-chan? She queried somewhat teasingly. Naruko giggled at this question and shook her head. Nah, at least, not yet. Maybe in the future, if it turns out that nobody else is right for me, but right now, I guess I'm just keeping my options open to me. Naruto-kun is certainly cute, and I like him well enough, but I dunno. Would it be so wrong for me to pursue a relationship with him if it should happen naturally in the future? She asked her mother. Kushina shrugged her shoulders and glanced towards the door. That's entirely up to you, dear. If you find out that he's the one that makes you happy, then I say go for it. But if you find somebody else, then that's okay too. Now, how do you feel? Naruko sat up and stretched her arms above her head, doing wonderful things for her, and sighed in relief as she managed to pop some kinks out of her back. Lowering her arms, she looked into her mother's eyes and smiled. I feel a lot better. It feels like my chakras flowing properly now for one thing. On top of that, all I feel for Minato now is pure and utter hatred. I don't feel any of that false love I had for him before. Now I just want to smash his balls so hard they fly up into his eye sockets. Finally, I don't feel like I'll forget Naruto-kun ever again. So all in all, I feel fantastic, Mom. She declared with a bright grin on her face. Kushina smiled happily for her little girl and turned her back to her daughter. All right then, once you feel you're ready, I want you to remove my seal. Okay, sweetheart. Just use the same seal I jotted down on that piece of paper and it will work. Be extra careful though, okay? She stressed, hoping that nothing would go wrong. Naruko nodded once before she took the ink brush and began to inscribe the seals on her mother's back. When she was done, she looked at the back of her mother's head and sighed as she brought her hands up into a seal. Curse seal removal. Seal. She said, wincing in sympathy as soon as she said it. Kushina was able to hold it in better than her daughter, but it was obvious she was feeling a great deal of pain when she collapsed to the ground and began to curl up into herself. She was whimpering from the pain. When she finally began to calm down, the older of the two redheads sat up slowly and reached up to wipe away the tears that were spilling down her face. Okay. That hurt worse than I thought it would, she admitted unashamedly. Naruko hugged her mother close and smiled at her affectionately. We're free now, Mom. How do you feel? She asked, happy that she and her mother were now free from that horrible man. Kushina chuckled a bit and hugged her daughter back. I feel great, honey. Like you said, it feels like my chakras working normally again. I also feel like killing that scumbag husband of mine. And all I want to do is smother Naruto with love. I don't think I'll ever forget about him again, she explained, happy for these changes. Naruko decided to ask a question that was now on her mind. Mom, are we going to move out, or are you going to kick Minato out of the house? You are filing for a divorce, right? She asked, just to be sure. Kushina smiled and hugged her daughter again. I'm kicking that scumbag out. This is my house and he is no longer welcome here. And if you don't mind, I'd like to name Naruto as the Uzumaki heir once again. But, if you still want to be the heiress still, then that's fine, sweetheart. I won't fight you on that, she said, smiling sweetly at her daughter. Naruko shook her head and smiled up at her mother. No, mother, Naruto deserves that far more than I do. Now, why don't we put our tops back on before Naruto-kun comes rushing back in here and gets an eyeful again? She suggested with a giggle. The violet-eyed beauty that was Kushina quickly nodded in agreement and slipped on her bra and shirt once again, with Naruko doing the same before they both vacated the room and smiled at Naruto. When he looked at them expectantly, Kushina spoke up. The seals are gone, Naruto-kun. We're free. Naruto smiled and hugged both of them tightly, happy that he finally had his mother and sister back fully. However, their happy moment was cut short when Minato entered the house and called out to the happy family that he was home. Scowling at this, the group of three made their way downstairs to confront him. When Minato saw them enter the living area, he narrowed his eyes at them, already sensing that something wasn't right. Kushina, what's going on? He demanded. Kushina glared at him and pointed her finger towards the door. Minato, we found the seals. More importantly, we've removed them. You won't be controlling us any longer. In the morning, I'm filing for divorce. And right now, I'm kicking you out of the house. You can pack your things, but then I want you out of my house. If you refuse to comply to my wishes, I'll force you out. And trust me, as strong as you are, I'm stronger. Minato growled at this and clenched his fists at his sides. He knew her words to be true. Minato had never been able to take his wife in a fight. With a heavy sigh, he walked past her and went to go pack his things. You're going to regret this, Kushina, he promised. Glaring at him, Kushina reached out and grabbed him by the arm. Don't threaten me, Minato. If you dare to try and harm me or my family ever again, I will end you. Now hurry up, pack your shit, and get the hell out of my home. Nodding his head, Minato went to their room and began to pack up his things before going towards the room where they kept their scrolls and books on techniques and the history of their clans and other such things. At first he was going to take far more than just what belonged to his clan, but he saw his family waiting there for him already. It would seem that they had already guessed his intentions and were here to make sure he didn't take more than what he was meant to. With a growl, the Yondaime Hokage packed up what was his and left the room before making his way to the front door. Without saying a word, He sent one last glare towards Naruto as if to say, "This is all your fault," and left the house. As soon as he was gone, the family of three turned and smiled at one another before they eventually decided to turn in for the night. After all, they had a big day tomorrow. As he went to his room, Naruto couldn't help but smile to himself. Today had been a rather interesting day for him. First, he had awakened a new Kekkei Genkai, earned himself a new fiancé and friend in Satsuki, and now he had his family back. Sure, there were some bad things that happened, but overall today was a pretty productive day. It was also a very interesting day. As he laid down to go to sleep, now in his nightwear, he couldn't help but think back to Satsuki and how cute she was. Still, he just couldn't make sense of her behavior or the way she talked. Did she like him or didn't she? It was really confusing. Oh well, he'd figure it out later. For now, he would just sleep and prepare himself for tomorrow. After all, tomorrow would be the start of a new life. A life without Minato plaguing his family. A day of new beginnings. And he just couldn't wait. When Naruto awoke the next morning, he couldn't help but smile to himself. He had slept most pleasantly and had the most wonderful dreams, though he couldn't remember much about them. Rolling over, he tried to stretch out, but found that his left arm wouldn't budge, much to his confusion. Slowly blinking open his eyes, he peered into the mischievous eyes of his sister and saw her grinning at him deviously. "Good morning, big brother. 'Bout time you woke up," she exclaimed joyfully before leaning in and pecking him on the nose. "You slept like a log. You must have been dead tired. You never even noticed when I snuck in here and cuddled up next to you to sleep beside you last night," she said with a giggle. Blushing slightly, Naruto couldn't help but look down and noticed that his sister was in a loose nightgown that was revealing a generous portion of her cleavage, and he wasn't sure if she was wearing panties underneath it or not. He certainly hoped she was. Naruto, as if sensing his thoughts, giggled and poked his nose. "Boop. You've got a dirty mind, big brother," she said before she released his arm and hopped off his bed. Doing a twirl, she skipped to his door and turned around to face him once more. "Mom's waiting for us downstairs. She's cooking breakfast right now, so you should go ahead and wash up. I'll be waiting for ya downstairs, Naruto-kun," she declared before leaving his room. Blinking for a moment longer, Naruto shook the cobwebs out of his head and slowly threw off his blankets before climbing out of bed, clad in only a pair of boxers that he slept in throughout the night. Yawning, he stretched his arms out over his head until he felt a satisfying pop in his back and let out a groan in contentment. Grabbing some clothes to wear for the day, he went to the bathroom so he could take a shower and get himself ready for the day. Meanwhile, downstairs, Kushina smirked at her daughter as she entered the kitchen, fully dressed for the day ahead of them. "So, did you ask him what you wanted to Naruto-chan?" she asked in genuine curiosity. Frowning to herself, the young redhead shook her head in the negative. "No, not yet. I wasn't sure how to bring it up. It's not like I can just come out and say, 'Hey Naruto-kun, why don't you kiss me and make me into one of those cool samurai thingies you made Satsuki-chan into yesterday?' After all, it'd just be awkward. Besides, we don't even know what the heck kind of power he has, or if his new Kekkei Genkai works on more than one person, or anything. We don't even know how he has it. Do you know anything about whose side of the family it came from, Mom?" Kushina sighed and shook her head. "I'll have to dig through the archives to be 100% sure, Naruto-chan, but I'm pretty sure that the Uzumaki clan doesn't have a bloodline like that anywhere in their history. I'm positive that it comes from Minato's lineage. He never unlocked it, thank Kami for that, but Naruto has. If Minato learns of this fact, if he hasn't already, it's bound to enrage him more than losing us and being kicked out of his home has. If only we had access to the Namikaze clan history, we could study up on it and see if they have information on this Kekkei Genkai of Naruto's. But I'm afraid that's out of the question with Minato moving back in with his clan," Kushina explained with a sigh. Naruko sighed as well before smiling when her mother started setting the food on the table. Sure, she had to wait for Naruto still, but he'd be down in another minute or two, she could wait. Looking back up to her mother, Naruko smiled and shook her head. Either way, we'll still learn more about his Kekkei Genkai through experience. Samurai's kiss, the ability to turn anyone of the opposite gender he kisses into a samurai. I want to see what it feels like, she exclaimed excitedly. Standing at the bottom of the stairs wide-eyed was Naruto. He was blushing a deep shade of red as he just stared at his female family members, unable to utter a word. Here was his sister, saying she wanted him to kiss her and turn her into a samurai girl. The blonde could see his mother looking at him with a smirk on her face, but he couldn't help but look away shyly. When Naruko noticed her mother's gaze, she turned around to see Naruto standing on the bottom step of the stairs, looking anywhere but at her with a healthy blush on his face. A fierce blush rose up on her face and she quickly turned around and stared down at her food. Sorry Naruto-kun. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I just kinda want to know what being a samurai would feel like, you know. It sounds kinda fun, Datbana. Naruto walked over and sat down in his chair at the table and looked at his sister somewhat shyly. It's okay Naruko-chan. Your first kiss should be reserved for someone you love, you know. It shouldn't be something you give away to me just because you want to be a samurai girl. I want it to be a special experience for you. Frowning at her brother, Naruko reached over and gripped his nose painfully between her fingers, causing him to yelp in pain. Listen here Buster, and listen well. I like you as both my brother and as a man. If I want to give my first kiss to you, then that is my choice as a woman. Are you going to deny me that right out of some self-righteous desire to protect my chastity or some such nonsense Naruto? Naruto reached up his hand to swat Naruko's away from his nose and rubbed at his sore nose for a moment before he finally responded. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful Naruko-chan. I didn't know, okay. If that's how you feel, then, I dunno. Is that how you feel? Do you really like me in that way? Before Naruko could reply, Kushina sat down in her chair and slapped a hand on the table hard to get their attention. Enough. You can discuss this later. Eat before your food goes cold, she demanded before she began to dig in. After a moment, she paused in her own endeavor to eat her meal before smirking at Naruto. And for your information, if she didn't like you, I doubt she would have crawled into your bed at night to snuggle with you, she teased with a smirk before she resumed eating. Blushing at this, the both of them ducked their heads down before simply digging into their meals with renewed gusto, choosing to simply remain silent, trying not to let their mother's teasing get to them. Later, the Uzumaki trio were currently on their way to meet with Makoto and her children as the Uzumakis had the plan to go together with them to file for their divorces. Along the way, Naruto and Naruko were having a hard time so much as looking at one another, let alone trying to hold a conversation. Kushina, finally having enough of it, looked back at her children and thwacked them both atop their heads. Alright, the both of you. Enough of the silent treatment. Naruko, you need to talk your feelings out with your brother. Naruto, you need to talk about this whole samurai kiss business with your sister. But you both need to realize that before you decide on anything, you need to talk to Satsuki. She is Naruto's girlfriend first and she has the final say in all of this. So no matter what you decide, just remember that she gets to decide your fate in this matter, Kushina stated with a sly grin. Naruko froze in place and flinched slightly almost as if struck with something. Looking into her mother's eyes, she soon glanced from her to Naruto and then back again to her mother's eyes. I forgot about her. I was so excited about becoming a samurai girl and being with Naruto-kun that I totally lost sight of the fact that he already has a girlfriend in Satsuki-chan. What if she doesn't agree to share him? I don't want to just give up on my brother. Naruto looked at his mother for a moment before looking deep into his sister's eyes and sighing softly. You really do love me, don't you, Naruto-chan? He questioned quietly with a kind-hearted smile on his face. I didn't realize. If you really want to become a samurai girl that badly, and you're really, truly serious about me, I'm willing to give a relationship between us a shot. But, here, our favorite blonde knucklehead looked at his mother again and nodded once. Satsuki has to sign off on it first. I just entered a relationship with her and I refuse to go behind her back and do something like this without her consent. Naruto explained, looking back into his sister's heterochromic, one blue and one violet eyes. I'm sorry, Naruto-chan, but it would feel like a huge betrayal to her. But, reaching out, the blue-eyed blonde took hold of one of her hands and smiled brightly at her. Let's talk with Satsuki together. I'm sure if we just explain ourselves to her and talk it out with her, she'll understand. At least, I hope she will. You two are best friends after all. I can't see her getting all that upset with you. Even over something like this. Naruto said in an attempt to assure his sister, although at some points he didn't sound too sure himself. The red-headed young woman found herself giggling at her brother's attempt to reassure her and found herself shaking her head in bemusement. After taking a moment to compose herself, she wrapped her arms around her brother and placed her lips against his cheek in a chaste, but warm kiss. After a brief moment, she pulled away, leaving Naruto a blushing mess. You're just too cute sometimes, Naruto-kun. I really do love you. So much. Let's go get Satsuki-chan. I just can't wait anymore to make you mine. And with a giggle, she grabbed her brother's hand and began skipping down the road with him off towards the Uchiha compound, leaving a flabbergasted audience behind them. Kushina couldn't help but giggle to herself as she followed after the two of them. Ah, young love. It's such an adorable thing to watch in action. I just hope Satsuki agrees to share Naruto, or else Naruto might go up in arms over him. She does seem rather possessive of him. A short while later, upon arriving at the Uchiha clan compound, the Uzumaki family had expected that they would be allowed entry as per the usual. Unfortunately, they were prevented entry by the guards at the gate. We're sorry, but Fugaku-sama has expressly forbidden us from allowing the three of you entrance into our clan compound. If you have business here, we're more than willing to relay a message for you, Kushina-sama. One of the guards explained. Kushina sighed and shook her head. Figures. I always hated that Fugaku-tem. Fine. Would you please deliver a message to Makoto-chan and her daughter Satsuki that we're here waiting for her? The five of us have business to take care of today. Right away, Kushina-sama. The same guard said before he disappeared from where he was standing to go and deliver her message. After a few moments, the guard returned with Makoto, Satsuki, and Itachi in tow. Bowing his head once to Kushina, he offered her a smile and resumed his post. Upon spotting Naruto, Satsuki rushed over and threw her arms around him, hugging him tight. After a moment, however, she realized what she was doing and quickly backed away with a blush on her face, turning away from him and saying, "What do you think you're doing, Baka? Don't just hug me like that so suddenly. You'll embarrass me." Naruto blinked and looked at Naruto for a moment before looking back at Satsuki. But, you're the one who hugged me. I'm so confused right now. Blushing even more, Satsuki turned around and poked Naruto in the chest somewhat roughly. Shut up, Baka. I did not. You're imagining things, she shouted out in frustration. After a moment, however, she blushed fiercer and grabbed Naruto's cheeks before pulling him into a fierce kiss. When she pulled back, she looked away and mumbled out, "And I didn't just do that either. I felt like it. Okay. Leave me alone." Naruto gained swirly eyes at this point and clutched the sides of his head, unable to gain a grasp on the situation at all. The blush on his face was prominent, however, as he did rather enjoy the kiss. Just what the hell is going on? While Makoto and Kushina laughed at what was taking place, Naruto looked on jealously for a moment before she released a frustrated sigh and grabbed her best friend by the hand. "Come on, Satsuki-chan, we need to go and have a talk." Away from everyone else. And since you've essentially just killed my brother's brain, it's obvious he won't be any good in a conversation with us right now, otherwise I'd bring him along to chat with us. Sighing again, the beautiful teenage redhead dragged her friend off to go and talk in private while Kushina and Makoto watched on with matching grins, both having a fair idea of what was going to be discussed between them. Looking at her son, Kushina offered him a kind smile and patted him gently on the head. Naruto, Makoto and I are going to go with Itachi to file for our divorces. You wait here for Naruto and Satsuki to finish having their talk. Once they come back, get to the academy. I won't have the three of you being late just because you felt you had something more important to do than be in class. Now bye bye Naruto-kun. And with that, the beautiful redhead leaned down and placed a soft kiss atop her son's head before she, her best friend, and Itachi Uchiha walked off towards the Hokage Tower to meet with Minato about the divorces. Once left alone, Naruto sighed and looked skyward. Great, now what do? I hate being left on my own in this wretched village. Sure, I've got a few friends, but this isn't a great place for me to be on my own. He thought silently to himself with a frown. With Naruto and Satsuki. Satsuki frowned as she pulled her arm free from her best friend's grip. Looking into Naruto's eyes, she puffed out her cheeks for a moment before releasing a breath and sighing. All right Naruto, what's going on? Why'd you pull me all the way out here and away from Naru-kun like this? Naruto smirked and quirked an eyebrow at her friend. So, you'll call him Naru-kun, when it's just you and me, but, baka, when you're in a crowd. What's the deal with that, huh? Satsuki flinched and quickly looked away as she folded her arms across her chest in a defensive manner. Shut up. I can't help it, okay. I don't know why. I want to be affectionate with him in public, but for some reason I freak out when I'm around him and I start acting like that. When I'm with other people, I can talk about him like normal. I can call him Naru-kun and act like I really want to. But when I'm with Naru-kun, I can't help but act all weird. The 15-year-old redhead giggled and nodded her head in understanding. I see. Well, just try to take a few deep breaths and calm yourself before you say anything to him or act or anything, okay? You're going to end up hurting him if you keep this up. He isn't sure how you really feel about him because of how you're behaving. He really likes you, Satsuki-chan. Please don't hurt him by behaving too much like a tsundere, okay? Blinking in stupefaction, Satsuki's eyes widened and she clutched at her chest almost as if struck. Wait, is that how I'm acting? Truly, I really don't mean to be. I can't help it. I don't want to hurt him. I really like him, and I want to show it too. But, how can I? Especially without it coming out all weird again. Naruto sighed softly and gently grabbed her friend's hands. Squeezing them gently, she offered Satsuki a reassuring smile and nodded her head once. Just be yourself and let it all happen naturally. Go on a few dates and try to let the romance happen. Hopefully nobody stupid tries to ruin them for you. Satsuki nodded and offered a small smile back before an inquisitive look dawned on her face. Thank you Naruto-chan. But, that's not why you pulled me out here, is it? What's on your mind? Naruto giggled somewhat nervously and reached up to rub at the back of her head. Nodding once, she looked away and sighed. You caught me. I wanted to talk to you about Naruto-kun. Here, she released a heavy sigh and closed her eyes shut tight. There's two things Satsuki-chan. First, I want to become a samurai girl like you. Second, I'm in love with my brother too. I want to be with him just like you are. I want you to share him with me. Please. Satsuki stood there wide-eyed in absolute shock. She couldn't quite believe what she had just heard. The part about becoming a samurai girl wasn't all that shocking. Satsuki could easily understand where her friend was coming from in that regard. It was an awesome thing to witness and she couldn't blame Naruto for wanting to become one. But being in love with her own brother of all things, that she had most certainly not expected. And now she expected her to share him. What the flippity whippity heck? For a while, both parties were silent. Eventually, Satsuki released a shaky breath and closed her eyes. Gritting her teeth for a moment, she reached up a hand and reared it back. Clenching it into a fist, she swung it forward and slammed it hard into Naruko's cheek, causing her to fall back onto her rear end. Rubbing her sore fist, Satsuki released a shaky breath and glared down at Naruko. Don't get up. Just sit there and listen to me. Okay, Naruko-chan. I love you and I want you to just hear me out. I promise I'm not mad at you. I just really needed to hit you right then. Please try to understand. Before Naruko could say anything in response, the beautiful raven-haired young woman held up her hand and cut her off. Don't interrupt, please. I need to get this all off my chest. Releasing a sigh, the young Uchiha closed her eyes and clenched her fists tight. You're asking me to share my first and only boyfriend I've ever had. And if I have anything to say about it, he's the only one I will ever have. That's a hard thing to process for me. But I love you, Naruko, and you're very dear to me. And if I had to share him with anyone, it would be you. But there's a problem. When Naruko looked about to speak, Satsuki hushed her up again and narrowed her eyes. I said no interruptions. Now, the problem is this. Naruto's the last male Uzumaki. Chances are that he'll need to take multiple wives to restore the Uzumaki clan anyways. There's only 3 of you left in the village, and now that Minato's been removed from your clan. Naruko's eyes widened in realization and she nodded once, quickly coming to the same conclusion her friend had. Satsuki sighed and shook her head. Yes, poor Naru-kun is going to need to take multiple wives whether he likes it or not. But here's the deal I'm going to propose to you, Naruko-chan. You and I will decide who gets to join our family. I'm going to marry him someday. You're going to marry him someday. That's already been decided, but anyone else will just have to get in line and will have to prove themselves. But I have some rules I'm going to set forth for you too. Okay, are you willing to hear me out? The blue and violet-eyed redhead nodded and smiled at her friend. Of course I'll hear you out. You're willing to share Naruto-kun with me. I'll do anything if it means I can be with him. She quickly agreed. The black-eyed Uchiha folded her arms under her and pushed them up a little as she stood a little prouder, facing her best friend with a somewhat smug grin on her face. Glad to hear it. My conditions are this. I'm going to be the one that Naru-kun shares his first time with, and I'm going to be the one that he marries first. Beyond that, anything goes. I don't mind if you or anyone else enjoys a little foreplay or whatever, but he's popping my cherry first and I'm getting his virginity. It's gonna be great, Satsuki exclaimed giddily. Naruko blinked in stupefaction over how excited her best friend sounded about losing her virginity to her brother, but when she thought about it and put herself in Satsuki's position, she couldn't help the perverse grin that crossed her face. Nodding her head in understanding, Naruko wiped at her mouth to make sure no drool had escaped her lips. I understand. I can't say I blame you any. I agree to your terms, Satsuki-chan. But I get to be his second in both things. I call dibs on second place. You heard me say it here and now. The young redhead exclaimed, trying to make sure she claimed her place in the hierarchy here and now before anyone could steal her position. The 15-year-old Uchiha twin giggled and nodded her head. Agreed. Now, what do you say we go get Naruto and get to the academy? I don't want us to run late because we got caught up talking about this for too long, she said. Nodding in agreement, Naruko took her friend's hand and began walking with her back towards where they had left Naruto. However, as they began walking off, she couldn't help but reach up and rub the spot where Satsuki had punched her. Damn, that smarts. You really didn't pull back on your punch, did you, Satsuki-chan? Wincing in sympathy, Satsuki glanced away and laughed somewhat nervously. Sorry, Naruko-chan. I needed to relieve the small burst of anger I felt at everything I realized in the only way I could think of at the time. I'm really sorry. Sighing, The redhead nodded once in understanding. It's fine. Just please, don't make a habit out of it. I don't like you being upset with me. And I don't like being upset with you. I love you, Naruko-chan. In fact, I think the first threesome Naru-kun has should be extra special with you and me. What do you think? Satsuki suggested, a sly grin and wiggling eyebrows appearing on her face. Naruko became a blushing, stuttering mess at this and froze in place, unable to utter a proper word or sentence in response. Satsuki found herself giggling giddily at this point and ran off ahead to go and meet up with her blonde boyfriend, leaving Naruko to rush off after her in an attempt to catch up. Hey, wait up, she shouted out. Are you serious? Because that sounds really kinky. As the chase continued, the duo couldn't help but laugh together as they continued on their merry way. What they didn't know was that they'd stumble upon a scene that neither of them could ever have expected from a village as great as Konoha. With Kushina, Makoto, and Itachi. As the group of three approached Minato's office, Itachi made their presence known by speaking up. Hello, Atumi. Is Hokage-sama in? We need to speak with him about something important. Atumi, the Hokage's secretary, looked up at the Hokage's guests and immediately went wide-eyed upon spotting Kushina. When she began to sweat nervously, the three of them instantly knew something was going on. Before she could say anything, Kushina scowled and spoke up. We're going in. Come on, you two. Quickly standing up, the brown-haired Atumi rushed to stand in their way and waved her hands in front of her in an attempt to dissuade their current course of action. Please wait. Hokage-sama's busy right now. You really can't go in there right now. Kushina narrowed her eyes and shoved past the secretary, roughly throwing open the door to get a look at what was going on inside the office. What she saw was something she figured she should have expected after all of his supposed late nights at the office. As the day he was born, Minato was standing behind his desk roughly thrusting in and out of an equally Mebuki Haruno. With the noise they were making, it was amazing that they couldn't be heard outside of the office. Then again, she supposed Minato most likely activated the silencing seals before the two of them began this little romp. Makoto threw her hands over her mouth and released a gasp in shock at what she was seeing. She couldn't believe that one of her dear friends was having an affair with Minato of all people. She couldn't fathom how long this had been going on, nor could she understand how Mebuki could be doing this behind Kushina's back. How long had she been betraying her friend like this? Looking at Kushina, Makoto could feel tears brimming in her eyes as she tried to imagine how Kushina could be feeling about all of this. Itachi, on the other hand, could only stare on in distaste at what he was seeing. With a sigh, he turned around and approached Atumi. How long have you known about this? Sighing as she watched Kushina and Makoto leave the room as well, Atumi closed the doors, offering a quick apology to her Hokage and his lover before she retook her seat behind her desk. Closing her eyes, she buried her face in her hands and shook her head. After taking a moment to compose herself, she looked up into Itachi's eyes before shooting a quick glance at Kushina's angry face and then back to Itachi. He's been doing this for years now. I only found out about it by accident a few years back, but I'm sure he's been having this affair for much longer. I'm sorry, Kushina-sama. I should have told you, but... Kushina sighed and shook her head. No, I understand. He threatened you, didn't he? It's okay. I don't blame you. It's not the worst thing he's ever done, she said with a sigh. Taking a seat, Kushina closed her eyes and shook her head. I wonder if Naruto knew about this. He probably did. I just wonder why he didn't tell me. Then again, with me being under the seal's effects, I doubt I would have listened to him at the time, she said with a sigh. Makoto frowned and placed a comforting hand on her friend's shoulder. It's not your fault, Kushina. You aren't responsible for this or for what happened to you and your son. Minato's the monster here, and as soon as he's done with that, we'll talk to him and be over with all of this. Hopefully we won't have to deal with him too much after that. Itachi frowned and shook his head. I wouldn't be too sure. He is the Hokage and can call on us for a variety of reasons at any time. Hopefully he will leave you alone, Kushina-sama, but there's always a chance something could happen in the future. So always be prepared for anything, he advised. The lovely redhead sighed and nodded. I'll be careful, but right now I want to focus on my children and try to make sure they stay safe. I don't want to think about Minato and what he could potentially do to cause problems in the future. Nor do I want to think about how long he's been cheating on me with that whore in there. Some friend she turned out to be. Kushina growled out. It was at this moment that the door opened and Mebuki stepped out, fully dressed and looking slightly disheveled. She looked directly into Kushina's eyes for a moment before quickly hurrying away, unable to utter a word in either apology or explanation. When the group of three looked back into the office, they could see Minato adjusting his Hokage robes before casually motioning for the three of them to enter. Entering the office, they shut the doors behind themselves before approaching Minato's desk. Standing across from him, they stared across at him apathetically and waited for him to speak, deciding to let him get things started. 7 years. I assume you wanted to know how long we've been doing this behind your back. Well, there's your answer. Now, I assume you three are here for a reason other than to satisfy your curiosity about my affair. He questioned casually in a tone that clearly showed he didn't care what they thought about his affair with a married woman. Kushina looked like she had been struck by a rather harsh blow. Unable to stop herself, she spoke up. 7 years. You've been cheating on me for 7 years. And with Mebuki of all people. She was, my friend. What the hell were you thinking? Which one of you star? Minato quirked an eyebrow as he stared at Kushina and shook his head. I don't really see how any of that is any of your business anymore, Kushina. You kicked me out of your house, remember? Besides, what does it matter? Her husband isn't satisfying her and our marriage has been up for years now. Even with that seal on you, it just wasn't enough to get what I wanted out of you. I needed to find it elsewhere, and Mebuki-chan gives me what I need. Now, tell me what you wanted. I don't have all day. Kushina snarled and clenched her fists tightly at her sides. She wanted nothing more than to lunge across his desk and strangle the smug bastard, but she knew it wouldn't get her anywhere but in trouble. So, reining in her temper, she took a deep breath and released it slowly in an effort to calm down. Once she felt sufficiently calmed, the beautiful redhead began to speak again. Makoto-chan and I came to file for divorce from Fugaku and you respectively. I assume there will be no objection from you about this. Minato sighed and nodded his head in acceptance as he reached within a drawer in his desk and pulled out some papers. I expected this. I already prepared everything in advance earlier. You won't have any objections from me, Kushina. I honestly just don't care anymore. I've been ready for this for years. I was really only staying with you out of obligation anyways, he admitted with a shrug of his shoulders. Before Kushina could say anything in response, Minato signed the papers in the proper spaces and shoved them across the desk. Turning to Makoto, he offered her a polite smile and decided to be courteous to her. As for you, I don't quite know what happened to warrant a divorce from Fugaku, but I feel it's safe to assume it's none of my business. It'll be up to you to convince him to sign these, but here you go, he said, shoving some papers across the desk to her as well. Makoto decided to be polite to Minato and offer up a small tidbit of information to sat Minato's curiosity as she signed where she needed to. It's complicated, Hokage-sama. Suffice it to say, our marriage has been a loveless one. I suppose you could say I've stayed with him out of obligation as well, mostly for my children. But what really cemented my decision to leave him is precisely because of my children. Nodding, Minato closed his eyes and released a breath. I never did like Fugaku's attitude. I'll admit I've done things others would view as despicable, but Fugaku's a genuine asshole. There have been times where I've wanted to have him thrown out of council meetings because of his attitude, but he hasn't stepped out of line enough to warrant such a thing. You have my sympathies for having to deal with such a creature for so long, Makoto. Blinking in shock at this, the raven-haired woman nodded in thanks to her Hokage and offered him a polite smile. Thank you, Hokage-sama. I appreciate that. I'm just disappointed that he's managed to turn my son Sasuke into a mini Fugaku. Sadly, there's nothing I can do to save him from such a path. Sasuke has made his choice and I have to accept that now. While Makoto and Minato talked, Kushina couldn't help but stew. How could Minato speak so casually and kindly with Makoto while being such an asshole with her? It just wasn't right. Saying such things to her really pissed her off. But, she realized, he was just trying to get under her skin. Taking in a deep breath, she released it slowly and signed the divorce papers where needed. After doing so, she shoved the papers back across the desk to Minato and spoke up to get his attention. Here, Minato. Is this all you needed to finalize the divorce? Stopping his conversation with Makoto, the blonde Hokage turned his attention to the divorce papers and examined them to make sure everything was in order. This is everything I need. And you don't need to worry, I won't challenge you for custody of the kids. They're yours, Kushina, Minato said as he stamped the papers and called for Atumi to come and take them away to be filed. Kushina was a little surprised by that, but nodded her head in thanks. Thank you. But, why? Minato sighed and shook his head before reaching up and covering his eyes. You should know by now that I don't care about Naruto. I do care for Naruko, but she's closer to you. I know that she doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. So I just don't see a point in fighting with you for custody over either of them. Nor do I need visitation rights. I can have more children in the future, so I don't mind. So you can be happy with them, Kushina. I just plain don't care. The violet-eyed beauty sighed and nodded her head. Well, for what it's worth, thank you. Come on, Miko-chan, Itachi-kun, let's get going. I'm sure Minato's got a busy day ahead of him and we still have more to do today as well. Goodbye, Hokage-sama, Kushina said before turning and walking off with Makoto and Itachi following after her. After they had left the tower, Makoto turned to her best friend and offered her a bright smile. Well, that was unexpected. Yeah, he was a smug asshole, but it went a lot better than expected. I suppose now would be a good time to go and get Fugaku to sign these divorce papers. What are you going to do, Kushina-chan? Kushina sighed and shook her head. I'm not sure. I'd like to spend more time with you, Miko-chan, but I'm not allowed in the Uchiha compound anymore. So I suppose I can wait for you at Ramen Ichiraku. Would that be okay? The ex-matriarch of the Uchiha clan nodded her head and hugged her friend close. I'll see you soon. Come, Itachi, let's go pay a visit to your father and get this divorce business settled. I want this over and done with as soon as possible so we can be free of him. Makoto said before turning and walking off with her eldest, and now considered only son. Watching them walk off, the leader of the Uzumaki clan could only hope that things went well for her dear friend. Sighing, she turned and began walking off to go and see her friends at the Ramen Ichiraku stand. I wonder how Naruto and Naruko are doing. With Naruto, earlier, our blonde protagonist couldn't help but sigh to himself as he tried to remain calm where he was standing. Being left alone in a village that hated him wasn't a pleasant feeling. They still didn't know all that he went through in this wretched place. How could they? Right now, he just hoped that Naruko and Satsuki would return soon so they could get to the academy and out of danger. Sadly, it just wasn't meant to be. Appearing from around a corner came three ninja, each wearing a flak jacket that signified that they were Chunin level in rank. Two were female while one was male, and they were each conversing about some random topic before laying eyes upon him. When they did, and they noticed that he was all by his lonesome, the male of the group gained a sadistic gleam in his eye and a smirk on his face. Well, well, what do we have here? If it isn't the Kyuubi incarnate. And he's all by himself too. My girls, what should we do with him? He asked his friends. One of the girls frowned and looked about ready to speak, but the other girl beat her to the punch. I say we make him suffer. I lost my mom in that attack and I haven't had a good chance to punish this little shit for it. I've heard so many stories from people about how they've pounded him real good, but not me yet. I'm amazed he's still alive. Then again, I suppose being the Kyuubi brat has its perks. Cracking her knuckles, the kunoichi grinned menacingly at Naruto and withdrew a kunai from the pouch on her calf. I hope you're prepared, you punk. I'm going to enjoy cutting into you. The other kunoichi spoke up at this point as she stepped in front of her friends. Guys, come on. We shouldn't be doing this. It's wrong. Let's just leave him alone and be on our way. Please. The male of the group snarled and gripped her by the hair, yanking her head back before slamming his fist into her face repeatedly. If you're going to try and get in our way, then you're better off laying there where you won't be a damn problem. Because you're our friend, or at least you were, I won't kill you. You should feel grateful. He said before tossing her to the ground and kicking her in the side a couple of times. When it looked as if she was about to struggle to her feet, the other kunoichi of the group quickly pressed a knee into her back and pressed her kunai against the back of her throat. I swear to Kami that if you try to get up, I'll kill you. I don't care if you're my friend, or rather were, the mere fact that you want to protect that monster is enough to warrant your death in my eyes. So shut up. Stay down, and be a good girl while we kill this monster, she demanded before standing up and turning to make her way towards Naruto. As the duo approached him, Naruto released a sigh and closed his eyes in resignation. He knew this was bound to happen and had no plans to fight it. Fighting it never ended well and just made things worse for him every time. It was best to just let things be and wait for them to get bored usually. However, a thought entered his head and it caused his eyes to shoot wide open as he came to a sudden realization. Satsuki. Naruto. I can't let them see this. Looking at his soon-to-be assailants, the blonde realized that he would need to fight back this time. Glancing down at his side, he knew he had just the right tool to do so. Grasping the hilt of his katana, he waited until the male drew just close enough and withdrew his blade in one quick flurry, almost as if he had practiced it a million times before, and severed the man's left arm right below his shoulder. Unable to believe what he had just done, Naruto froze, both from shock and from the sight of the blood shooting from the stump that was left in the arm's place. Being inexperienced as he was, this was just too much for him and it left him open for what was coming next. While the man screamed out in agony at losing his arm, the woman stared in shock for just a moment before her rage urged her on and she lashed out with her fist, catching Naruto in the eye and not just stunning him, but knocking him to the ground and temporarily blinding him in that eye. Once the teenager was down, the woman pounced on him and began to wildly slash and stab him repeatedly, refusing to let him get in another attack like that. At some point during this attack, she knocked away his blade and began to laugh hysterically. Finally. Oh Kami, finally. You have no idea how long I've waited to make you pay for all you've put me through, you Kami forsaken brat. Why Hokage-sama allowed you to live for so long is beyond my understanding. But, looking down at the young man underneath her, the woman couldn't help but admire his appearance for a time. You know, Minato did do something right with you. You got his looks at the very least. Tell me, brat, are you a virgin, or has that been taken from you already too? She questioned with a rather sadistic gleam in her eyes. Naruto, already bleeding out and unable to put up any form of resistance, widened his eyes and shook his head in fear. Please, don't do this. I want to save my first time for someone as special to me, he pleaded weakly. Smiling brightly to herself, the woman quickly performed a medical technique to patch Naruto up just enough so he wouldn't bleed out on her and leaned down until her lips were just centimeters from his. Don't worry, Kyuubi, I promise you're going to enjoy every second of this. After all, I'm not without compassion. Even you don't deserve to die without first feeling the touch of a woman. Now, sit still and let me rock your world, she said sultrily before she captured his lips with hers in a fiery kiss while she her hands into his pants to begin massaging his member. As this happened, Naruto's eyes rolled into the back of his head and he retreated into his subconscious, unable and unwilling to stay conscious through what was about to happen to him. I'm sorry Naruto, Satsuki. I just can't do this. After Naruto fell into blissful unconsciousness, the woman pulled back from the kiss and found herself smirking. Oh, he can't sleep through this. I won't let him, she said to herself as she slowly freed his member from his pants and got a good look at it. For being the Kyuubi brat, he's sure got a delicious looking. I think I might just enjoy this, she said as she pulled back her hair and engulfed Naruto's in her mouth. Running her tongue along its length, she began to savor the taste of it and moaned loudly as she began to bob her head up and down, enjoying her ministrations on his. It was this scene that Satsuki and Naruto stumbled upon as they returned to the area they had left their darling Naruto at. The first thing they noticed was all the blood pooling around a man as he lay still on the ground. It appeared that he had thrashed around at first, most likely from the shock of losing his arm, but then he had gone into shock and, without proper medical treatment, soon perished. They noticed another woman lying on the ground nearby, but she didn't appear to have any serious wounds on her. Instead, she looked to be quivering in fear, afraid of something, but they weren't sure what. When she looked their way, she gave them an apologetic look before motioning with her hands and eyes towards something. Looking that way, their eyes widened in horror at what they were witnessing. However, feelings of rage also bubbled up inside of them and caused two things to happen with the both of them. Seeing their beloved Naruto-kun in such a bloody, violated state and seeing that woman further violating him in the way that she was caused them to feel such rage that Satsuki's Sharingan eyes sprung to life, a single tomo spinning in both eyes. Naruto, on the other hand, allowed the Kyuubi's influence to spring to life and cover her in a two-tailed cloak as she got down on her hands and feet. As the two of them prepared to attack the woman assaulting their beloved, something strange began to happen. Pink and orange chains began to wrap themselves around Naruto as he was lifted off the ground. His wounds began to heal and the kunoichi that had been assaulting him was blown backwards and sent tumbling along the ground, end over end. When the blonde academy student touched back down on the ground again, he opened his eyes and immediately collapsed to his knees, unable to support his own weight or move even a single muscle. However, what happened next might be an even stranger occurrence than this. A bright glow came from Naruto's stomach and a bright light shot out from it and hit the ground mere feet from him before disappearing in a flash. Standing there was a beautiful young woman in her late teens, looking to be about 17 or 18 years old, with beautiful red hair and golden eyes with slitted pupils. She was wearing a rather short pink outfit that exposed a lot of leg and, if she were to bend over too far, you would easily be able to see what kind of panties she was wearing. On her feet she wore white socks with orange leggings that went up to just below her knees and she wore platform sandals as well. Something that everyone there noticed was that she carried a daisho set, in this case a dual pair of katana that, unknown to everyone there, were unusually colored. Earlier, Naruto's mindscape. As Naruto opened his eyes, he didn't expect to appear inside of the sewer that was his mindscape. Looking around, he could see the water up to his knees and knew that it was bad. It had never been like this before, and he had been here a number of times before. However, he had yet to meet the Kyuubi after all these years. So he figured this would be just like all the other times and he'd be left on his own to suffer in misery just as usual. However, what he didn't expect was for the water to suddenly begin pulling him along by his feet in one direction in a sudden rush of speed. Screaming out as he was dragged along, Naruto flailed his arms about in an attempt to remain upright, barely able to keep himself from being dragged under the water. Eventually he came to a stop. When he did, he panted for breath and began to look around frantically, trying to figure out where the hell he was now. When he looked up, he saw the mighty Kyuubi staring down at him from behind its cage, the seal in plain view keeping it trapped behind the bars. Realizing that the Kyuubi must have brought him here, Naruto breathed out a sigh of relief and offered it a polite smile and a wave. Hi there. Sighing, the Kyuubi closed its eyes and smacked one of its paws against the cage. Why are you just giving up, Naruto? Are you really willing to just let that woman rape you like this? Shaking his head, the teenager frowned up at the Kyuubi and shook his head. I don't know what to do. I froze up when I cut off that man's arm, Naruto said ashamedly. I know I shouldn't have. I couldn't help it. I've never done something like that before and it's my first time seeing so much blood that wasn't my own. I just froze. She took advantage of my moment of weakness and knocked my blade away from me. And she wounded me so badly. What can I do?